I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zeiss Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark.
Hello everybody, and welcome back to the final chapter of our biased reaction to the Advanced Player's Guide.
That's
in
right.
which we biasly react to the items.
It's time for items. We've got to biased react to all the items.
Boop. Here
So
we go.
first, of
chapter,
course, you can see
the 6th.
there is a dead dragon, and Korkai and Quinn are just, like, standing on all of this treasure. And the items chapter, of course, starts with an introduction that explains, like, what types of things are in here, such as alchemical items, snares, and magic items. And then goes straight into the weapons and adventuring gear.
Is that the same dragon, the dead dragon there? Is that the same dragon from the cover of the Pathfinder core rulebook who has then been slain?
I don't know. It might not be, because it has that weird ring around its horn.
Fair enough, fair enough.
It is a red dragon, though.
It is a pretty ferocious looking red dragon.
But it could be that it is the same one. Does the one on the core rulebook have that ring around its horn? That distinctive ring?
It's a little hard to tell from the other angle of it, but...
Well, it's certainly a similar kind of dragon. Alright. So... the weapons and adventuring gear. We've got not a huge number of weapons in here, but at least a fair number of them. There's Sword Cane, always good for Investigator, because you can conceal it very easily. Then there's some uncommon, like the Claw Blade for Catfolk. The Kakara, which Tengu enjoy, but not only Tengu.
The Tengu Gale Blade, which is for Tengu.
Yes, well, it's a fan-shaped sword designed by Tengu. It has 5 broad blades that join at its hilt. And a lot of these are agile, except the Kakara, which is sort of a shove, 1d6, 2-head, 1d10, versatile piercing situation. A lot of these are like agile finesse with some other things. The Claw Blade has like a ton.
I see a comment here. Tengu also enjoy the Claw Blade. But
yep, and Wakizashi is agile, deadly d8, finesse, and versatile piercing.
And we got some more adventuring gear too. A lot of this is investigator themed with our brass ear, a detective's kit,
Concealed sheath.
Then we've got the dueling cape, which is more of a swashbuckler themed item.
A net, a parrying scabbard, and a periscope. Plus, there are ranged weapons. The Bola, in case you want to do a ranged trip, and the Daikyu, in case you want to shoot your bow and not have to worry about getting any volley situations.
So Mark mentioned ranged trip, which is allowed by a new weapon trait introduced in this book. This book also introduces the concealable trait for those weapons that are much easier to sneak in.
Ranged trip lets you take a -2 and trip somebody from far away. It's even more annoying than melee trip because they're not next to you when they stand up either, so they have to spend tons of action.
And just like the core rulebook had class kits for all of its new classes, for all of its classes, this book has class kits for the Investigator, Swashbuckler, Oracle, and Witch. So
sure
they're convenient quick start guides for your character.
Yep.
And then here on this next spread, we have the treasure table. The summary of all of the new treasures that you can find in this book.
There's a lot of treasure that is not weapons and adventuring gear.
All the way from levels 1 to 20.
There's at least something at every level, although some of them, like the consumables at level 13 and 14, or the permanent items at level 17, do not have many, but there's at least something. And there's certainly a lot of level 1 consumables.
Well, that's where you're going to have everybody starting out, so you could have lots of options there.
So let's start with alchemical items.
A bunch of new alchemical items here, bombs,
which are like also in the treasure table, but this is a one-stop shopping spot for your alchemist. It's repeated here.
So we've got the Blight Bomb, which has
It's poisonous.
toxic flesh-rotting chemicals that do not just poison damage, but persistent poison
Very
damage.
persistent.
And poison splash damage. It's your one-stop source of poison damage.
Crystal shards.
Which explodes, leaving caltrops on flat surfaces and does a bunch of piercing damage.
Dread Empool, which does mental damage and frightens things.
Ghost Charge is very convenient for if you're fighting undead. It deals positive damage.
And enfeebles undead.
Mm-hmm.
Alchemical elixirs are the ones you like to drink. Drakeheart Mutagen gives you a bunch of armor class and some perception, which can be handy, although your will saves, reflex saves, and recall knowledge are not going to be pleased. And then you can do a final surge, ending the mutagen to get to stride twice for one.
Just like a Drake does.
Now it's a Drakeheart Mutagen.
The Focus Cathartic is an elixir that allows you to try to counteract the confused or stupefied condition.
Yep. Olfactory Obfuscator is an elixir that makes it so that it is harder for people to smell you.
Quite useful, because creatures with scent are often the bane of stealth plans.
Yep. That sure is true.
The Sinew Shock Serum is similar to the Focus one on the previous page that we just talked about, except for this one to counteract some of those more physical conditions.
That's right.
And then we got a bunch of, well, a couple of poisons and then a bunch of tools. So we have the Cerulean Scourge, which is a 16th level poison. Very, very potent for that reason. Does huge amounts of poison damage. And this one doesn't have a bunch of other brighter effects. So this is a good one for if you just want to...
Says Linda has yet to encounter the rogue feet foil senses.
Oh, I do know foil senses. I have a character with it, but not everybody's got that feat.
And I've certainly seen people who
You
are
gotta be
just
7th level for it,
so paranoid that they just take precautions against scent anyway, like rub mud on themselves and stuff like that. So you don't have to have foil senses, but it's
good to have different
convenient
options. Like
because you don't want to be
right?
You don't want to be constantly having to worry about all of these senses all the time. Be like, all right, GM, I'm rubbing mud on myself, and just every time I'm slowing my heartbeat down to a stop in case there's a banshee in there. You never know. And I'm not thinking about anything except white noise in case something has thud sense.
Adventuring seems really inconvenient sometimes. And people, especially like people describe the things that their PCs are supposedly doing, and it's like, wow, your PC must have a miserable life, because it's like, well, you know, we're going to explore for as many hours as possible every day and not do any recreation and only sleep in the cheapest inns and buy the cheapest food and...
Yep, we're sleeping in stables because it saves us 5 copper pieces.
And we're never going to spend any money on entertainment, and...
That's right, it's pointless.
And we're going to own exactly one outfit.
Yes, anything else is a waste of money. You never clean it. Sinew Shock the Serum, anyway, was sort of... It's similar to the Focus Cathartic, but for enfeebled and clumsy instead of the mental conditions.
Was someone asking about that?
No, that's just sort of where we were before, so I just wanted to go back to that.
I actually talked about that and the Cerulean Scourge.
Oh, and the Cerulean Scourge. I missed it. Okay.
No worries, no worries.
Yes, the first of poison. It's just a high-level poison that just does damage, no other situation involved. Most of the other high-level ones have other situations involved.
I can tell you didn't hear me, because that's pretty much exactly what I said.
Ah, okay.
Alright, the next poison is Leaden Leg, which, as its name implies, messes with your speeds.
Alright. Yeah, it sure does. Your speed is going to be so slow with Leaden Leg. And you can get to a pretty nasty status penalty, and you can just sort of kite anything that has built up a high stack of Leaden Leg. Alright.
If you want to get around people who are using Olfactory Obfuscator, you should, or you otherwise want to be able to smell things that are lurking about, you can use the Bloodhound Mask to give yourself some imprecise scent. as well as an item bonus on your survival checks to track creatures.
That's right. Forensic dye is a special dye that when you add it to like another chemical or material like blood or mud, it reacts, transforming to a murky color. For up to 10 minutes, you can spend a minute to brush it onto another object, and when it comes in contact with an exact match of the chemical, it takes on a bright blue color. So you can tell if the same chemical or material has shown up in another location.
Quite useful for investigations.
Yep.
Then we have Ghost ink, which is sort of the classic flame-activated invisible ink.
Yep. Origin Unguent, which is you apply it to two objects or an object and a creature, and you check if they share an origin based on the chemical bonds if they do come from the same origin.
So
Such that if they're
yeah.
broken from the same hole or a poison sample or body part from the same creature.
Another very investigatory item.
Yep.
Skin Stitch Salve, which helps to hold wounds closed and assist with administering first aid or treating wounds.
Mm-hmm.
Sovereign Glue, the glue that keeps things stuck together ridiculously. They can only be separated by a successful DC 50 athletics check. Which they're so separated that if you try to pull things apart, you're probably just going to break them to pieces and leave the glued together pieces of them and then not really separate the objects.
Yep. Unless they're particularly durable. However, it doesn't work well on creatures because you can just kind of exfoliate the skin that the glue is on. It just comes off.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a long time to set, so it only works if they're willing. To begin with, hi,
Hello.
Katrina. Timeless salts are salts that you can sprinkle on to up to 10 cubic feet of stuff to preserve it for a week without decaying.
So you can use this to preserve corpses, and you can also use it to protect to protect, say, clothing or other objects from things that would cause them to decay or be spoiled or damaged by bugs and similar things.
Absolutely. Then there's Universal Solvent, which can stop Sovereign Glue.
Counter to Sovereign Glue.
Other glue-based attacks.
And other glue-based attacks, yes.
So
Such
that's
as Tanglefoot.
all of the alchemy.
Then we've got snares. The Engulfing Snare, which creates a spiky cage of bones or some other tough thing to damage and capture the creature. The Rhyming Flare Snare.
Yep.
Which shoots a flare up into the sky. It's not going to hurt anything, but it's going to make it darn obvious that somebody stepped into your snare.
The nauseating snare that's 100% about dealing the most sickening that you can for the snare of its level, and then Snagging Hook Snare, which is going to deal piercing and slashing damage and potentially immobilize you.
Then we've got some new magic consumables. There is the Antler Arrow, which can help pin down creatures as if they were being afflicted by the critical specialization effects of a bow.
Yep.
And if you already have those critical specialization effects, then it is just even harder for them to escape.
Then there's Belize Feathers.
Reference to the Belize Angel.
That's right, which can cause, with a free action activate, creature damage burns with holy light, and it may take a status penalty to AC and saves and reduces resistances by 5.
And that is a talisman. Speaking of talismans, there's also a Basilisk Eye, which you can attach to your shield. And then when you block an attack, cause it to activate and slowly partially petrify your foe, causing them to become slowed for a minute.
Yep. You also can use a Candle of Invocation to burn for an hour and give a bunch of extra spells to people. By which I mean 2 additional spell slots, each at half the highest spell level the character can cast.
The Candle of Revealing reveals invisible creatures in the area.
Yep. The corrosive ammunition is basically ammunition that does some persistent acid damage. Can be very helpful. Let's see, there's a question that says, why can you not loot snares that have already been set? And the answer is that, according to the rules for snares, like, once you've built the snare out there, it's just there. You can't carry them from place to place. You carry the ingredients for the snares. Like, so if you, like, make a giant pit, or, set up all these logs and hooks, or, like, some kind of thing that's gonna shoot 200 arrows at them, it's with some of the really high-level ones. Like, it's all out there already, and you've done all of the work, so... Like, that's where the snare is. Especially with, like, a pit, it's very obvious, because it's like, what are you gonna do now? It's there. It's a pit.
I imagine in some cases, like, you could work with the GM to have something where it's like, well, I'm gonna try to disassemble this to reclaim some of its parts and things like that,
yeah.
that I could use those.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Dust of Corpse animation is dust that you can sort of sprinkle onto a corpse to turn it into an undead. Everyone likes doing that.
You can have a skeletal or zombie minion.
Freezing ammunition is cold, and it can slow the enemy with freezing ammunition. It doesn't actually deal cold damage, it just slows them down with intense cold.
Mm-hmm.
Gecko potion.
Okay, so doing cold damage would be the purview of the rune.
Well, I mean, corrosive ammunition does persistent acid damage.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Gecko potion makes you into a gecko finger person.
Which helps you with climbing and palming objects, and makes it harder for, or also it helps your reflex DC against disarm attempts. Makes it harder for people to steal things from your hands.
Incense of Distilled Death can give fast healing to undead. It comes from negative energy, but it doesn't impact living creatures. Oil of Object animation can create an animated object.
Oh, I realized I was about to ask a rules question. Dhampir. Such an edge case.
Dhampir says that they are affected just like an undead would be, so... Yes, it's one of the many Dhampir things. We're going to get to Oil of Unlife in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Oil of Object animation makes an animated object. It's kind of like a Dust of Corpse animation, but with objects. Oil of Revelation is an oil that you can put on, and when it damages a creature, the wound glows with light. It can reveal an invisible creature, so it can be merely hidden and not undetected.
Mm-hmm.
Now the Oil of
Unlife, which is the healing potion for all of your undead and friendly Dhampirs out there.
Sure thing. Potion of Disguise, where you take the appearance of some kind of random thing for 2d12 hours.
And the potion is key to some specific creatures, so it might be like, this disguises you as a leopard, or a fire giant, or something like that.
Yep. The higher level potions could even turn you into a large creature, although it doesn't give you reach. It does give you reduced reach for being tiny if you take one to become tiny, though. And the greater potion of disguise lets you try to turn into a specific individual. Can be handy.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite, though, is Potion of Expeditious Retreat. Because of the fact that, like, we were talking about first level things, and Liz was like, could we do a Potion of Expeditious Retreat? And we were saying, well, you know, there's already things that gives movement speed. And I was like, what if it was literally Expeditious Retreat, and you drink it, and then you run away? And then we did it. So, when you drink it, it takes an action to drink it, but you immediately begin fleeing for a minute with a plus 40-foot speed bonus. And you immediately stride to start fleeing, so you get back.
So it's literally the potion of runaway.
Yes, it's actually Expeditious Retreat, unlike the old Expeditious Retreat
which is more like Expeditious Approach.
Yeah, well, that's why it became like Fleet Step. In Pathfinder 2nd Edition, because it was completely misnamed. It was often used to approach. So now it literally is to run away.
Run
Potion of
away.
Retaliation makes acid, cold, electricity, or fire energy around you that retaliates when people smack you in melee. Potion of Shared Memories, you can put a memory in there, and then anyone who drinks it can recall the memory vividly. Ration Tonic is a vial that contains what appears to be water, but is actually nourishes you for a day's worth of food and water. And a Greater Ration Tonic nourishes you for a week, instead distributing the nourishment in a healthy flow.
So if you're so back to those PCs who like just say we don't need biological functions. I'm just going to drink a ration tonic once a week. I don't need food or water.
No, wait, that costs 55 GP. I will eat my food. I will eat my food. I'm eating horse food because I saw that it costs less than the food for me.
Yup.
But that's supposed to be for your horse. Yes, but look, I have read an article online on Wikipedia that says that you could eat hay.
And as long as you occasionally eat other things, you won't suffer from malnutrition.
That's right.
But doesn't that sound really unpleasant? My PC is immune to unpleasantness. We've also got the shielding salve, which you can spread onto objects or apply to creatures in order to do something that's pretty similar to the shield spell.
Yep. It's like the shield spell, except you don't have to take a reaction to block some of the damage. Terrifying Ammunition is so frightening that it frightens things even if they make their will save, which can be pretty handy. Time Shield Potion freezes you in time for 2d4 rounds when you drink it. So it's like, oh, I'm going to drink this. Okay. I'll be back in a few rounds.
So you
And
can
you
use
can't
that
just
to
stand
pause
there.
effects with durations.
And you vanish from your space. As far as the universe is concerned, you don't exist as long as the potion lasts. And then you suddenly appear. That is the last consumable item, but yet there are many permanent
magic
items.
We have, starting off with the Earth Glide Cloak, which, as its name suggests, allows you to burrow.
Once per hour. There's also the Earth Sight Box, which is like the Earth Glide Cloak, except it lets you see instead of glide. You can sort of open the box, and the sand inside arranges itself to show you stone terrain surrounding you to a range of 60 feet, even like tunnels and voids in the earth, which can be pretty handy. Give you a map of stuff once per day. The Envisioning Mask is a mask that essentially is like based off the idea of Pleroma Aeons, who, like, you know, they put up those weird envisioning pictures to try to tell you what they're doing. And once per day you can lose the ability to produce language and communicate wordlessly through pictures, which is telepathic with a 100-foot range, understandable to all.
I like this exploding shield. It's a shield that when somebody breaks it, you can make it explode and hurt everything within a 15-foot cone in
It's
front of
pretty
you.
solid. It's a free action, and like it's 4d6, so that's like a second level Burning Hands situation with piercing damage for free. So Fearsome Rune is a critical hit that with the weapon makes your opponents frightened, possibly frightened too with the greater fearsome. Fire Jump Ring is a ring that once per day you jump into a fire, then jump out of a different fire, which can be pretty funny. Four Ways Dog Slicer is
Four Ways Dog Slicer and that both seem like very goblin-themed items. Oh, you mean if I set some fires around here, I'll be able to just jump around?
Mm-hmm. The Four Ways Dog Slicer is when you can't decide whether you want Flaming, Frost, or Shock. And, well, with the Four Ways Dog Slicer, you could have it all. You just take a bunch of damage every time you switch to one of the different types of damage. And the fourth way of the Four Ways Dog Slicer is the Black Gem that disables the active property rune, and you do not take damage for that.
Mm-hmm.
The Glamorous Buckler is just so lavish and glamorous that you can get better deception to feint, and once per day you can dazzle the target with your dazzling feint.
As you faint, it sparkles mightily. The phrase "sparkles mightily" was allowed in.
Yeah, why not? It sparkles mightily.
Like a shining palm.
A lot of things can sparkle mightily.
Alright, fair enough.
Hellfire boots are boots that give you resistance to fire damage, and then you can walk around and leave fire behind you once per minute, which can be funny because it's a lot of fire, and it's every minute, and it lasts a minute. So if you're very fastidious about it, you can make sure there's always fire nearby.
Getting some Hades vibes here.
The Infiltrator's accessory is a sword cane that is a very fashionable accessory for high society events. And it can magic aura itself, and they can't really tell what's going on. Just that it's a superb fashion accessory.
It's just this non-magical fashion accessory. Definitely not a weapon.
Definitely not. Lover's gloves are gloves that give you a bonus on diplomacy check, and once per day you can grasp the hands of a willing creature you have strong positive feelings about. It doesn't have to be love. That creature gets a +1 on saves and 10 temporary hit points. If they share your feelings, you gain the same benefits. And when you both roll a success on an emotion save, for negative emotions, you both get a critical success instead.
Legit.
Mask of the Banshee.
Much less friendly than the Lover's
gives you
Glove.
a big bonus on intimidation, and you can unleash soul-chilling screams that deal negative damage, or full will of the Banshee for the greater one that's level 19. Speaking of screaming in Banshees, Medusa's Scream is a shield with a Medusa head on it, which once per day can turn creatures to stone. Or once per hour for the greater version. Who doesn't like to turn creatures to stone every hour? Probably the creatures who got turned to stone.
The predictable silver piece, for those of you who want to cheat at coin flips. You rub the coin and you decide which way you want to have it line up, and when you flip it, and it will land on the side that you thought it was going to.
Yup. The Ready rune on armor lets you don it much faster. And its greater Ready is much faster. You can don light armor with just one action, somehow put on the whole thing, or medium and heavy with a 3-action activity.
And the rare rod of cancellation, which lets you counteract a wide variety of things.
Yup. The Rod of Cancellation then can't be activated again for 2d6 hours.
So you can either suppress it for a bit, or if you want to fully drain the magic of the Rod of Cancellation, you can also destroy the item that you're counteracting entirely.
That's true, although it fails to counteract most artifacts and similarly powerful items, but it reacts explosively with the Sphere of Annihilation. Rope of Climbing is a rope that can hold quite a bit of weight, and then once per day it just starts climbing, and that's the lesser rope. And the moderate rope is once per hour it starts climbing, and the greater rope, which by the way is only level 7, like it's not that much higher level than the other ropes, is always climbing anytime you want it to be climbing.
Makes sense, because you're not necessarily going to need it more than once per hour all the time.
That's right. The Slates of Distant Letters. Well, every hour you could just you write something with the chalk on your slate, and it goes to the other side of the slate, up to 25 words.
For distant communication.
Yeah, every hour on the hour, you can distantly communicate with each other with your pair of slates. Each slate can be activated once per hour, so you can go back and forth.
Let's see. What about these sleeves of storage?
They're basically so voluminous that they can hold up to 5 bulk of items.
So they're
extra
like bag of holding sleeves?
Yes.
Oh, but you can put your familiar in there too.
You can. You can put a creature in there, but if it's tiny. If your familiar's in your sleeve, you can't place any items in there. And the greater sleeves of storage can hold up to 20 bulk of items, and the familiar could survive for up to 4 hours instead of 1 hour.
Mm-hmm. But the familiar can always come out whenever they want, so you don't have to worry about the familiar running out of air.
The greater sleeves 20 bulk is a lot to have up your sleeves.
It is a lot to have up your sleeves.
Spellguard Blade is a +1 striking Mangosh that also gives you the bonus from the parry trait from Mangosh to your saving throws against spells too. And Spirit Sight Crossbow is +1 striking Ghost Touch Crossbow that once per minute you can look into the ethereal plane with imprecise vision, which can potentially let you try to hit targets on the ethereal plane, which normally you couldn't do. Level 8 is a pretty low level for that, but it's pretty handy. Staff of Impossible
Oh,
Vision.
that's interesting. So you can project your own senses through the eyes at the end of the staff to see things that you wouldn't normally be able to see. So, like, take the staff and raise it up above your head, or, like, use it to peek around a corner without you going around the corner, things like that. And, it has a bunch of different spells that you can use depending upon what level it is, whether you're looking at the basic Staff of Impossible Visions all the way up to the True Staff.
With Spirit Song, Uncontrollable Dance, Unfathomable Song, and Weird in there.
So it's generally got a lot of themes in it that have to do with occult. I see a lot of occult spells going on here, things that have to do with fear or sight or eyes, or also things that have to do with like warp mind or strange geometry, unfathomable song, things that are kind of unnatural, just like the staff sprouting a bunch of eyes that you've decided to carry around with you.
Speaking of the opposite of unnatural, the Staff of Nature's Vengeance.
The Staff of Nature's Vengeance
is made of hawthorn and automatically is shillelaghed at all times. And it gives you a bunch of vengeful, naturey abilities, which go eventually all the way up to Earthquake and Punishing Winds and Volcanic Eruptions. Like, you can do cloud kills, control the water, have the sun explode, creepers attack things. Like, nature's not going to be happy to or friendly to your enemies once you have this staff.
That is true.
Staff of Providence is a little friendlier, though, because it can give you a bonus on survival to sense direction or subsist, and religion to recall knowledge. And then it just, it's kind of more... This one's pretty friendly. It's more got like an oracle. It can give you divine inspiration and foresight, and
let you check on the status of your enemies, get rid of curses, become immune to spells. It has energy aegis at the highest level, protection, foresight.
Yep. The Urn of Ashes contains the ashes of a benevolent ancestor. As a reaction, when you become doomed, the ashes become doomed instead. And therefore you don't have to become doomed. When they're not doomed, you can shoot out negative energy using the Urn of Ashes at your opponents to deal some negative damage. Victory Plate is, like, I think the only armor in here. And it's a +1 resilient full plate that's covered with the tabard of different types of victories that you have had. When you kill creatures, you can change what victories are on there. And basically, once per hour, you can touch one of the 4 victories to gain benefits depending on what type of thing you were victorious over. For 1 minute. Like, you can protect against mental damage if it's an aberration or fey, against good damage if you defeated a celestial, and so on. The Greater Victory Plate not only can be used once per minute instead of once per hour, which means you essentially can have protection like all the time. The resistance it grants is 10 instead of 5, or 20 for the Ooze's precision resistance, which was 10 in the lesser version.
Convenient. But this is the illustrated item here, the Walking Cauldron, as you can see with its little iron crow's feet. Can walk around with a land speed of 25 feet, and you can command it to follow around after you. So you've got this ungainly cauldron that's trying to hobble and follow you. It can carry around potion ingredients and liquids and things like that.
Yep. Up to 2 bulk. If you overload it or put anything else inside of it, including that sprite in your party who wants to go in there, it stands in place and refuses to move until 10 minutes after you remove the excess.
It gets grouchy.
Yep. Then there's 5 wands and a winged armor rune.
So how about we start with the 5 wands here?
All right. So there's the Wand of Crackling Lightning, which can double the width of the line of the lightning and creatures that fail their save are flat-footed.
The Wand of Hopeless Night, which has darkness, and frightens creatures that end their turn within the darkness.
Yes. The Wand of Overflowing Life, which casts Heal, and then excess healing magic wells up from the wand to heal you after you cast the heal. The Wand of the Snowfields, which is a cone of cold but creates difficult terrain with a field of snow. Wand of the Spider, which casts web, but creatures that fail their athletic checks or reflex save can take poison damage from a poisonous web. And then finally, Winged Rune, which is a rune that grants a fly speed when you are wearing it. And Greater Winged Rune can do it all the time instead of once per hour. And of course, the glossary and index. Everyone loves Glossdex, and this Glossdex is super glossy.
Rather lengthy, yes.
It's very glossy. And look, there's an OGL at the end, too.
That there is.
And an ad for Gods and Magic. I still like that triptych cover of it that we'll talk about.
Me too. We'll be talking about that next time, because on our next episode, we are going to be giving a biased reaction to Gods and Magic.
But this sounds like a good place to say bye to YouTube, since we have finished with the end of this episode.
Bye, YouTube!
Bye, YouTube!